The loneliest seat in a crowded room is the one beside a woman everyone has already judged. I remember staring at the empty chair next to me while crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across the ballroom ceiling. Music floated through the air. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed from every corner of the reception hall. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. Everyone except me. I adjusted the sleeve of my navy blue dress and forced a small smile as another couple passed my table. The wedding venue sat on a sprawling estate just outside Lexington, Kentucky, surrounded by rolling hills and white fences that looked like something from a movie. It was beautiful, the kind of place little girls dreamed about, the kind of place where people expected happy endings. I glanced down at my phone. A picture of my 6-year-old daughter, Lily, filled the screen. Her gap-toothed smile immediately softened the ache in my chest. I had almost stayed home with her tonight. Almost. But the bride was my cousin, and family obligations have a way of finding you even when you wish they would not. Across the room, relatives I had not seen in years whispered behind polite smiles. They thought I did not notice. They thought I could not hear. A single mother. Still alone. Poor Clara. The words never reached my ears directly, but they did not need to. Some judgments are loud even when nobody speaks them. I took a sip of sparkling water and looked around the room. Every table seemed full except mine. A chair remained empty beside me like a permanent reminder that I had arrived alone. Again, the string quartet shifted into a slower melody. Couples moved toward the dance floor. The bride laughed as her husband spun her beneath soft lights. For a moment, I felt genuinely happy for them. Then reality returned. My phone buzzed. A message from my babysitter appeared. Lily had fallen asleep and everything was fine. Relief washed through me. No matter how difficult life became, my daughter remained the brightest part of it. I slipped the phone back into my purse and exhaled slowly. That was when the room changed. I felt it before I understood it. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Waiters straightened their posture. A ripple moved through the ballroom like wind across water. Curious, I followed everyone's gaze toward the entrance. A tall man had just entered the reception. Black tailored suit. Dark hair. Calm expression. The kind of presence that did not demand attention because it naturally owned it. Even from across the room, I could feel the effect he had on people. Guests who had been laughing moments earlier suddenly seemed careful. Respectful. Almost nervous. I did not know his name, but everyone else apparently did. The man exchanged a few brief greetings before his eyes moved across the ballroom. Then something unexpected happened. His gaze stopped on me. Not the bride. Not the wedding party. Me. For a second, I looked behind me to make sure he was not actually staring at someone else. But there was nobody there. Just an empty chair. His expression remained unreadable. Then, without hesitation, he started walking in my direction. And with every step he took toward my table, I had the strange feeling that my life was about to change in a way I could never have imagined. The closer he came, the quieter the room seemed to become. Conversations faded into the background. Even the music felt distant. I sat perfectly still while the man crossed the ballroom with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in any room he entered. Several guests watched openly. Others pretended not to. When he finally reached my table, he stopped beside the empty chair and looked down at me. Up close, he appeared even more intimidating than he had from across the room. Not because he looked angry. Quite the opposite. His calmness felt deliberate, controlled, powerful. "May I sit here?" he asked. His voice was low and steady. I blinked. Of all the things I expected tonight, this was not one of them. "Of course," I replied. He pulled out the empty chair and sat beside me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I became painfully aware of dozens of curious eyes following the interaction. The stranger seemed completely unaffected by the attention. "You look uncomfortable," he said. I almost laughed. That obvious? A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Only to someone paying attention. I glanced toward the dance floor. Most people are paying attention to the bride. Not everyone. There was something unusual about the way he said it. Not flirtatious. Not arrogant. Simply honest. A waiter appeared beside our table almost immediately. The speed of the service surprised me. The stranger ordered a sparkling water. The waiter nodded and hurried away as though responding to an important executive. I studied him carefully. "I feel like I should know who you are." A few nearby guests suddenly became interested in their desserts. The reaction did not escape me. "Vincent Romano," he answered. Recognition spread through my mind. Even I had heard the name before. Successful businessman, influential investor, a man surrounded by rumors, wealth, and stories that nobody seemed able to verify completely. I am Clara Bennett. I know. My eyebrows lifted. You know? You are the bride's cousin. I stared at him. You did your homework. I prefer understanding a room before entering it. That answer somehow made perfect sense. For the next several minutes, the conversation flowed more naturally than I expected. We spoke about Kentucky, about the venue, about the chaos that always accompanied weddings. I found myself relaxing despite the strange circumstances. Vincent listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he made me feel as though every answer mattered. It had been a long time since anyone had done that. Then his eyes drifted toward a group of guests near the bar. I followed his gaze. Two women quickly looked away. I recognized them immediately. Relatives. The same relatives who had spent years turning my personal struggles into family gossip. Vincent noticed my expression. Friends? He asked. Not exactly. Family. I sighed. Unfortunately. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Vincent leaned back in his chair and glanced around the ballroom. You know, he said quietly, people often mistake being alone for being weak. The words struck deeper than they should have. Because he was right. That was exactly what had happened tonight. Exactly what had happened for years. I looked down at my hands. Sometimes it is easier to let them think whatever they want. Vincent studied me for a long moment. Then he stood, slowly, deliberately. The movement immediately attracted attention from half the room. My heart began beating faster. What are you doing? I asked. Instead of answering, Vincent extended his hand toward me. And when I looked up into his eyes, I saw a decision had already been made. My eyes moved from his face to the hand he was offering me. For a moment, the entire ballroom seemed to disappear. The music faded. The conversations blurred into background noise. All I could see was Vincent Romano standing beside my table, as though he had every reason in the world to be there. Vincent, I said quietly, what exactly are you doing? A faint smile touched his face. Helping you. I almost laughed. You do not even know me. I know enough. His hand remained extended. Calm. Certain. Patient. Around us, curiosity spread through the reception hall like wildfire. Guests who had been pretending not to watch had completely abandoned the effort. I could practically feel their attention pressing against my shoulders. My heart pounded. Every instinct told me to refuse. To stay seated. To avoid becoming the center of attention. That was how I had survived most of my adult life. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Endure. Vincent leaned slightly closer. His voice dropped low enough that only I could hear it. Pretend you are my wife for one dance. I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. What? His expression never changed. Pretend you are my wife. My pulse somehow accelerated. That is the most ridiculous thing anyone has ever said to me. Probably. Why would I do that? His eyes briefly shifted toward the relatives near the bar before returning to mine. Because everyone in this room has already decided who you are. I swallowed hard. And I think they are wrong. The words landed somewhere deep inside me. Somewhere I had spent years trying to protect. I looked away first. The dance floor glowed beneath soft golden lights. Couples moved gracefully across polished wood. Happiness surrounded us. Yet for the first time all evening, I no longer felt completely alone. This is a terrible idea, I whispered. Most memorable moments begin that way. I should have laughed. Instead, I found myself studying his face. There was no mockery there. No pity. No hidden agenda that I could see. Only confidence. And something else. Respect. Something I had not felt from many people lately. Especially not tonight. One dance. I asked. One dance. I exhaled slowly. Then, before common sense could stop me, I placed my hand in his. The reaction throughout the ballroom was immediate. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. A few guests looked genuinely shocked. Vincent helped me to my feet with effortless confidence. His hand remained steady around mine as he guided me toward the center of the dance floor. Every step felt unreal. The string quartet transitioned into a slow melody. Soft piano notes filled the room. My stomach twisted with nerves. Relax, Vincent said quietly. Easy for you to say. No one here can hurt you. The certainty in his voice startled me. We reached the dance floor. Vincent placed one hand lightly against my back while maintaining a respectful distance. There was nothing inappropriate about the gesture. Yet somehow it felt more intimate than anything I had experienced in years. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone had chosen me publicly, not out of obligation, not out of sympathy, deliberately. As we began moving with the music, I noticed dozens of eyes watching us. Vincent seemed completely unbothered. Then he leaned slightly closer and spoke words that made my breath catch. Tonight, Clara Bennett, they will remember you as the woman I chose. For a few seconds, I forgot about the crowd entirely. The ballroom, the music, the whispers, all of it seemed to fade into the background while Vincent guided me across the dance floor with effortless confidence. His movements were steady and precise. Not once did he make me feel uncomfortable. Not once did he make me feel like part of some performance. Yet somehow the entire room was watching. I could feel it. Hundreds of eyes. Questions. Assumptions. Curiosity. The strange thing was that none of it mattered as much anymore. Because standing beside Vincent made me feel something I had not felt in years. Scene. The music continued softly around us. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across the polished floor. Couples danced nearby, but a noticeable space seemed to form around us, as though nobody wanted to interrupt whatever was happening. You look surprised, Vincent said. I laughed nervously. I am dancing with a man half the state seems afraid to disappoint. A faint smile appeared. People exaggerate. Do they? Frequently. The answer made me smile despite myself. Across the ballroom, I noticed my relatives watching openly now. The same people who had barely acknowledged me earlier suddenly seemed fascinated. One aunt nearly dropped her champagne glass when Vincent gently spun me beneath the lights. Another cousin whispered something into her husband's ear while staring directly at us. The entire situation felt surreal. They cannot stop looking, I whispered. Vincent glanced toward them briefly. Good. I blinked. Good. You spent the entire evening trying not to be noticed. His eyes returned to mine. You deserve better than that. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had ever said those words to me before. At least not in a very long time. The song continued. Slowly, my nerves began disappearing. The tension in my shoulders eased. For the first time all night, I found myself laughing naturally. Not politely. Not because social etiquette required it. Genuinely. Vincent seemed to notice the change immediately. There she is. Who? The woman who existed before everyone else's opinions. I looked away quickly, suddenly emotional for reasons I could not fully explain. The truth was painful. Somewhere along the way, I had become so accustomed to surviving that I forgot how to simply exist. Then something unexpected happened. The bride approached the edge of the dance floor. My cousin looked between Vincent and me with obvious confusion. Clara, she called. I walked toward her while Vincent remained beside me. Are you going to explain this? She asked quietly. Before I could answer, Vincent spoke. We are enjoying the wedding. My cousin stared at him for several seconds before nodding awkwardly and retreating. The exchange lasted less than a minute, yet it somehow intensified the rumors already spreading through the reception hall. Everywhere I looked, people were talking, speculating, wondering. Vincent seemed entirely unconcerned. When the song finally ended, applause echoed throughout the ballroom. Not because we deserved applause, simply because everyone had been watching. My face immediately turned warm with embarrassment. Vincent, meanwhile, appeared completely composed. Then he surprised me again. Instead of returning me to my lonely table, he offered his arm. Come with me. Where? Dinner. I laughed softly. I already had dinner. Then dessert. Vincent, Clara. The way he said my name made me smile. Around us, dozens of guests watched every movement, every glance, every word. For the first time in years, I was no longer the woman sitting alone at the edge of the room. And judging by the way people were staring, neither was anyone willing to forget it. Vincent guided me toward a quieter corner of the reception hall where a small dessert table overlooked the estate gardens. The ballroom remained alive with music and conversation, yet something had shifted. People no longer looked through me. They looked at me. I was not sure whether to feel grateful or terrified. You are thinking too much, Vincent said as he handed me a small plate with a slice of wedding cake. That is because tonight makes no sense. Most interesting nights do not. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. The strange part was how natural everything felt. We had known each other for less than an hour, yet sitting beside him felt easier than sitting beside relatives I had known my entire life. Outside the tall windows, the Kentucky night stretched across rolling hills beneath a silver moon. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the air. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Then a familiar voice shattered it. Clara. My stomach immediately tightened. I knew that voice. Slowly, I turned around. Standing several feet away was Nathan Walker, my former boyfriend, the father of Lily. Beside him stood a woman wearing an expensive designer dress and a diamond engagement ring large enough to catch every chandelier light in the room. Nathan looked exactly as I remembered. Confident, polished, comfortable. The kind of man who never questioned whether the world would make room for him. I did not realize you were coming tonight, he said. Neither did I replied. His eyes shifted toward Vincent. Curiosity immediately appeared. And who is this? Before I could answer, Vincent calmly stood from his chair. He extended his hand. Vincent Romano. Nathan's expression changed slightly. Recognition, surprise, maybe even uncertainty. I have heard of you, Nathan said. Most people have, Vincent replied politely. The two men shook hands. Nothing about the exchange was openly hostile. Yet tension quietly settled between them. Nathan looked back at me. You look well. It was a harmless sentence. But hearing it from him felt strange. This was the man who had once promised forever and then slowly disappeared when life became complicated. The man who sent birthday cards but rarely appeared in person. The man who always seemed to have reasons. Thank you, I said. Nathan glanced between Vincent and me. I did not know you were seeing someone. Before I could respond, Vincent answered calmly. There are many things people do not know. My heart nearly stopped. Nathan blinked. His fiancée looked confused. Across the room, several nearby guests suddenly became interested in our conversation. Rumors traveled fast at weddings. Faster than music. Faster than truth. Well, Nathan said awkwardly. That is certainly unexpected. Vincent's expression never changed. Life usually is. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Not aggressive. Simply undeniable. For the first time, I realized Nathan was no longer the person with power over my emotions. The years of disappointment suddenly felt distant. Small. Because standing beside Vincent, I remembered something important. My value had never depended on who stayed or who left. Nathan eventually offered a polite goodbye before leading his fiancée back toward the dance floor. I watched them disappear into the crowd. Then I released a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Vincent studied me carefully. Are you all right? I looked at him for a long moment. I think I finally am. But as the evening continued and whispers spread throughout the ballroom, I began to realize something far more dangerous than gossip was happening. Somewhere between that first dance and this conversation, I had started looking forward to every moment beside him. The reception continued around us, but something had changed inside me. The ballroom no longer felt intimidating. The whispers no longer felt sharp. The judgment that had followed me for years seemed strangely distant. Vincent remained beside me through every conversation, every awkward encounter, every curious glance. He never demanded attention, yet somehow attention followed him everywhere. We spent the next hour moving between groups of guests. People who had ignored me earlier now greeted me warmly. Some asked questions. Others offered compliments. A few acted as though we had always been close friends. The sudden transformation would have been amusing if it had not been so obvious. Vincent seemed to notice my thoughts. You do not trust any of this, he said quietly as we stepped onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. Cool night air replaced the warmth of the ballroom. Should I asked. He considered the question. Probably not. I laughed. That is the most honest answer I have heard all evening. The gardens stretched beneath strings of soft lights. Beyond them, rolling Kentucky hills disappeared into the darkness. For a few peaceful moments, neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable, natural. Then Vincent's attention shifted toward my purse resting beside my chair. Earlier, while reaching for my phone, a small photograph had partially slipped from a side pocket. He gently picked it up before it could fall. May I? He asked. I nodded. His expression softened immediately when he saw the picture. Lily smiled up from the photograph, missing one front tooth and holding a stuffed rabbit nearly as large as she was. Your daughter? He asked. I smiled despite myself. Lily. For the first time that evening, Vincent looked genuinely surprised. Not because I had a child. Because of the affection that instantly appeared in my voice. How old is she? 6. He studied the photograph for another moment. She looks happy. She is the best part of my life. The answer came without hesitation. Vincent handed the picture back carefully, as though it were something valuable. Tell me about her. Most people asked about the challenges of being a single mother. Most people asked how difficult it was. Vincent asked about Lily. So I told him everything. I told him about her obsession with horses, her love of drawing, her collection of bedtime stories, the way she insisted on making pancakes every Saturday, even though most of them came out crooked. I found myself talking more than I intended. Vincent listened to every word. Not politely, not out of obligation. He listened because he genuinely cared about the answer. When I finally stopped, he smiled. She sounds remarkable. She is. And you raised her while working full-time? I looked away. 2 jobs, actually. His expression changed. Not pity. Respect. That could not have been easy. Some days were harder than others. And yet you did it. The words settled gently between us. Nobody had ever said it quite like that before. Not as an observation. As an accomplishment. The music drifted from the ballroom behind us while soft wind moved through the gardens. For a long moment, Vincent looked out across the estate before speaking again. You know, Clara, strength is usually quieter than people think. My heart skipped unexpectedly. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen briefly before slipping it back into his pocket. Whatever message he received, it seemed unimportant compared to this conversation. And somehow that realization affected me more than I wanted to admit. When we returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere felt different again. The wedding reception had entered that stage of the evening where formalities disappeared and emotions became more honest. The band played softer music. Guests lingered in small groups. Laughter echoed from every corner of the room. Yet the moment Vincent and I walked back inside together, I noticed several conversations pause. The rumors had clearly grown larger than either of us expected. Vincent seemed completely unaffected. I was still learning how he managed that. We had barely reached the edge of the dance floor when another familiar voice interrupted us. Well, this is unexpected. I turned and immediately recognized my cousin Rebecca. She was not the bride. She was the cousin who always seemed to know everyone else's business before they did. Her smile looked pleasant enough, but her eyes told a different story. Good evening, Rebecca, I said. Clara. Her gaze shifted toward Vincent. You certainly made tonight interesting. Vincent offered a polite nod. I hope that is a compliment. Rebecca laughed lightly. That depends who you ask. I felt tension immediately. Not because she was being openly rude. Because I knew exactly where the conversation was heading. She folded her arms and looked back at me. I have to admit, nobody expected this. Expected what? I asked. You arriving alone and somehow leaving with the most powerful man in the room. Several nearby guests suddenly became very interested in listening. My stomach tightened. I had spent years navigating conversations like this. Comments disguised as jokes. Criticism disguised as concern. Rebecca tilted her head slightly. Life works out differently for everyone, I suppose. The implication hung in the air. Single mother. Failed relationship. Struggling life. Lucky break. Before I could respond, Vincent calmly stepped closer beside me. His expression remained perfectly composed. I agree, he said. Rebecca blinked. You do? Absolutely. His voice remained polite. Life works out differently for everyone. The room seemed to grow quieter. Some people spend years judging others, Vincent continued. Others spend those same years building character. My heart stopped. Rebecca forced a smile. I did not mean anything negative. I know. Vincent's tone never changed. That is what makes it interesting. Several people nearby suddenly looked down at their drinks. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. For the first time in my life, someone had recognized what was happening without me having to explain it. More importantly, someone had chosen to stand beside me instead of remaining silent. The moment lasted only seconds, yet it felt monumental. Rebecca quickly excused herself and disappeared into the crowd. As soon as she was gone, I released a slow breath. Vincent glanced at me. You all right? I laughed softly. You do that often? Do what? Say exactly what everyone else is afraid to say. A faint smile appeared. Only when necessary. The band began another slow song. Couples returned to the dance floor. Around us, the reception gradually resumed its normal rhythm. But something inside me had changed again. For years, I had accepted every judgment quietly. Every whisper. Every assumption. Tonight felt different. Not because Vincent had rescued me, because he had reminded me I was worth defending. Then, as we stood together beneath the chandelier light, Vincent looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. It was softer than before, more personal, and for the first time all evening, I found myself wondering whether this had stopped being a simple act of kindness long ago. The wedding reception was beginning to wind down when I finally stepped outside alone. The cool Kentucky night wrapped around me like a quiet blanket. Behind me, music still drifted from the ballroom, softened now by distance and time. Strings of lights glowed across the gardens while the moon hung above the rolling hills. For the first time all evening, I could hear my own thoughts. I rested my hands against the railing overlooking the estate grounds and took a slow breath. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. I had arrived feeling invisible. I had expected another night of polite smiles, whispered judgments, and reminders of everything I lacked. Instead, Vincent Romano had walked directly into my life and turned the entire evening upside down. The glass door behind me opened softly. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. "You disappeared," Vincent said. I smiled faintly. I needed a minute. He joined me at the railing, leaving enough space between us to feel respectful and comfortable. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt familiar now. "Easy. Do you regret it?" he finally asked. I looked toward the gardens. "The dance." He nodded. No, the answer surprised even me. Vincent smiled slightly. "Good." I laughed softly. "You sound relieved." "Maybe I am." His honesty caught me off guard. I turned toward him. The ballroom lights reflected faintly in his eyes. For the first time that evening, he looked less like the powerful man everyone seemed to fear and more like a person carrying thoughts he rarely shared. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Anything." "Why me?" Vincent was quiet for several seconds, long enough that I thought he might avoid the question entirely. Instead, he looked directly at me. "When I entered that ballroom, everyone was trying to be noticed. I listened carefully. You were not." The wind moved gently through the gardens below. "You were sitting alone," he continued. "Not because you were weak. Not because nobody wanted to sit beside you. You were sitting there because you had learned how to survive disappointment without asking anyone to save you." My heart tightened. Vincent looked away briefly before continuing. "Then I saw the way you spoke about your daughter. The way you carried yourself despite everything people assumed about you." His voice remained calm. "Most people would have become bitter. Maybe I was." "No," he shook his head. "You stayed kind." The words settled deep inside me. For years I had measured my life by what had gone wrong. The relationship that failed. The struggles. The sacrifices. Vincent seemed to see something completely different. "You barely know me," I whispered. "I know enough." The answer came immediately. We stood there beneath the moonlight, surrounded by quiet gardens and fading music. Then Vincent surprised me one final time. "What if I do not want a night to be pretend anymore?" My breath caught. The question hung between us, simple and impossible to ignore. Somewhere inside the ballroom, laughter echoed through the final moments of the celebration. But standing beside Vincent, I suddenly realized the most important part of the evening might only be beginning. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my small house on a bright Saturday morning while Lily carefully poured chocolate chips into a mixing bowl and declared herself a professional baker. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Music played softly from a speaker on the counter. The entire room felt warm and alive. Sometimes I still thought about that wedding and wondered how a single evening had changed so much. Vincent had not rushed anything after that night. He had not overwhelmed me with promises or grand gestures. Instead, he simply showed up. Consistently. Respectfully. He appeared at Lily's school play and cheered louder than anyone else. He brought soup when I caught a cold. He listened when I talked about work. He remembered small details most people forgot. Most importantly, he treated Lily like she mattered. Because to him, she did. The sound of a car door closing outside pulled me from my thoughts. Seconds later, Lily ran to the window and grinned. "He is here." My heart still reacted every time. Vincent walked toward the front door, carrying a paper bag from Lily's favorite bakery. The moment he stepped inside, she launched herself into a conversation about a science project and a horse she wanted to adopt someday. Vincent listened with complete seriousness, as though every word carried the importance of a business meeting. Watching them together never failed to affect me. Somewhere along the way, they had formed their own bond. Something real. Something neither of them had expected. Later that afternoon, we drove to a small lakeside park outside Lexington. Spring had transformed everything. Wildflowers covered the hills. The water sparkled beneath a cloudless sky. Lily raced ahead toward a nearby playground while Vincent and I followed more slowly. We found a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree overlooking the lake. The same kind of tree that seemed to appear in every meaningful memory. For a while we simply sat together watching Lily laugh in the distance. Peace settled around us. The kind of peace I once believed belonged only to other people. Then Vincent reached into his jacket pocket. My breath caught immediately. He smiled. You always know. You are impossible to read until moments like this. He laughed softly. Then his expression grew serious. Clara Bennett, the best thing that ever happened to me began with an empty chair. Emotion instantly filled my chest. Vincent, you taught me that family is not something you inherit. It is something you choose every day. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the sincerity beneath every word. You and Lily became the most important part of my life when I was not paying attention. Tears blurred my vision. I do not want temporary anymore. He took my hand gently. I want forever. Nearby, Lily had stopped playing and was watching with wide eyes. Vincent smiled toward her before looking back at me. Will you marry me? I laughed through tears and nodded before he could finish repeating the question. Yes. The answer felt effortless. Certain. Right. Lily immediately ran toward us, cheering loud enough to make nearby birds scatter into the sky. Vincent pulled her into a hug before wrapping an arm around me. For a long moment, the three of us stood together beneath the spring sunlight. Looking back, I realized something important. The most beautiful changes rarely arrive the way we expect. Sometimes they begin with heartbreak. Sometimes they begin with an empty chair. And sometimes the person who walks into your life unexpectedly becomes the reason you never have to face the future alone again.